Blog Talk Radio.
It seems we have a problem. I would like to introduce Bigfootsbad Paranormal Investigators team.
Welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. On the lines with me today, I have Tim and I have Robert on the lines with us today. I guess today we're going to talk to a ufologist named Art Campbell. He's one of the historians and researchers on the San Augustin UFO crash. Before we call our guest, I was going to say, how are you guys doing today?
I'm all right.
Pretty good.
Pretty good? Well, I'm going to call our guest for the show and get him on the line. As soon as it decides to let me. There it goes. There it goes.
Hello.
Hey, Art.
Yeah.
This is Jeremy with BFP Radio.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have
Jeremy.
two of my co-hosts on the line with me today. I have Robert and Tim on the lines with me.
Hi, Art.
Okay.
Hello, Art. Before we get to what's that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Something cut out. I wasn't sure what it was.
Oh, you can hear us fine though, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. I need you to speak up a little bit, but I can hear you.
All right. Well, before we get started with the show, I was going to say, can you explain a little bit about the case and how you got involved with it?
Yes, I can do that. Bring them up. I started in '95, and I'll bring them up to date. What we found when, that kind of thing. And yeah, I could take a few minutes to do that.
All right.
How soon are we going to be on?
We're on right now.
Hey, we're on now. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, hi, everybody.
Hello.
My clock's a little slow here in Oregon. We don't quite get with it here. Okay, let me give you a rundown. When I started this project. I started in 1994. I went out to a crash site that was said to have, UFO said to have crashed in western New Mexico outside of Magdalena. That's about 85 or 90 miles out due west of Roswell. And we went on down to the plain of San Augustin, which is about 125 miles due south of Roswell. I'm sorry, due west. And started looking around and found some very interesting stuff. I'd been a Western historian and had pretty well understood what you would find in pioneer areas, dishes, china, tin cans, what have you. And we found a lot of strange stuff on the surface that I've never seen on the surface before. It turns out the ground had been churned earlier on by the military when they tried to fill in a trench that the UFO crash made. and that's how we got the stuff turned topsy-turvy. It went on for 75 or 100 yards, and we were able to establish that the UFO had crashed there, and that there was a trench maybe 65 or 70 yards long, and the military had filled it in, hauled the UFO off, and there were also 4 bodies. And we have no live witness. We have one live witness today who was 5 years old at the time, but to say the least, he's a little controversial. But he obviously was there because he took some important people there in 1990, showed them the exact site, showed them what the path of the UFO was when it came in, and he was with the family of his family members, his dad, his uncle, a cousin, and a brother. He was the youngest at the time, and we think possibly over the years that they've talked about this, and so what he recalls was much more than a 5-year-old would normally remember, and that's got him into some difficulty with UFO researchers. But apparently he was there. Well, we started working at the site in 1995. And will any of your viewers be anywhere near computers?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you a website, and I can talk about what we're dealing with there on my website. My website is www.UFO .com. That's www.UFOcrashbook.com.
Yes.
And what they will see are a black page showing a lady pointing to a UFO and several subheadings. This is the home page we're talking about now, UFOcrashbook.com. And this lady is pointing to a UFO that she saw in the same area in 1982. Our crash happened, we think, July 2nd, 1947. This lady saw this thing over the radio telescopes down at Magdalena. So down below, if anybody wants to scroll, we can talk a little bit about what's down below. But essentially, we started finding materials, and the thing that I found first, I'm going to have your readers go to the chapters down below there. It says UFO crash at San Augustin. Scroll down on your computers if you have one, and I'll try to explain it if you don't. Go to chapter 6, the artifact and its examination, and you will see something there you won't believe. We got inside this artifact device, and it had inside was a gold wire about 1/10 the size of human hair, and we have a red human hair there to show the size. And we think this was an artificial body organ that came out of one of the aliens when the ship crashed. Now, the gold wire was inside. It's only a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of it. But up at chapter 4, if you scroll back up to chapter 4, you can see the artifact as we found it, and it should be on a blue handkerchief right there in chapter 4. And that's what we found. It looked like a solidified pile of chicken fat laying in the sand. And it's an artificial organ of some kind that's made out of polyethylene. Well, that, needless to say, got us kind of turned on. And we started out there for the next few years. I was out there for 9 years by myself, just about every summer. And we found material that I think it's down in chapter 8. It's a foil-like material, and I'm pulling it up now. And it's a foil-like material we had analyzed. It's a Chapter 8, and we had it analyzed, and we found out that this foil-like material had unknown quantities of all kinds of materials in it that we don't put in aluminum foil. It looks like aluminum foil, but it isn't. And this material apparently was not made on this planet, and probably not in the solar system. They can tell by checking the isotopes of material at the formation of a planet what the isotopes should be. If they found different isotopes, like they'd find on a meteor or something like that, then that doesn't come from here. Well, none of this foil, and about twice as much as we found, as you see in Chapter 8, came from Earth. So that was our first indication. We didn't get that research done until about 2010 when we found a benefactor who paid for it. And we sent the material through a inductively coupled plasma mass spectroscopy called ICP-MS, and the price tag was about $500 every time they did a run. So we found somebody who financed it for us. And that's kind of where we stand now, and we went back in 2011 and found where the craft had skipped down and had left some bigger pieces of metal. And I don't have them on the website, but that's kind of an overview of where we are. We started in 1994, 95 actually, and we're now up to 17 years later to 2012. And we've been out there almost every summer up to about 2006 or 7. And found lots of material.
Well, as I said, we have a bunch of questions coming, and they're kind of all over the place. I tried to organize some of them.
Okay, well, I get all kinds, so I'm ready for them.
Before we get started, well, I guess we already kind of got started. Before we get deeper into the material, I was going to ask, people are asking, people that don't know, how does this relate to the Brazil Ranch? Like, is that the same craft, or is this different? Or
same night.
Same night?
We think the Roswell craft went down on the night of July 2nd, and Mac Brazel, the rancher, did not discover the material till the 3rd or 4th, didn't get into town till the 5th or 6th. The story didn't break in the papers till the 8th, if I recall, 8th or 9th of July 1947. Our witness, who died in 1969, told his relatives that he was a civil engineer, very honest person, had been a World War I officer, and said he saw something shiny on the plains about a mile off the highway, and he knew, working with the ranchers there, who was building buildings, who wasn't, that kind of thing. So he thought it was a plane crash. He got over there as soon as he could. It took him about 10 minutes. And he found this disc laying there. It was split, had a vertical split in it. It was up against a little bit of a ridge. And there was a couple, 3 alien bodies laying outside, and he said there's one inside. And he told a friend that was alive until 1999 that he knew it wasn't of this world. He knew it. And they weren't there a half hour before the Army showed up and shooed them off, which is pretty typical. I guess the Army probably knew that it was had been seen on they'd probably seen it on radar and knew about where it crashed. So they were there about 30 minutes later and shoot off the civilians and told them not to say anything.
There's a story that I read online. It says something about there was an individual who said they seen what they thought was a child walking in a field. Do you know about that story?
A child watching
it looked like there was a child walking in a field, but it turned out it was an alien of some sort.
I don't know. In our story, we find we have dead aliens, and there was a child present because he wouldn't have been able to lead those people there if he hadn't been there. It's very, very difficult to find, and you couldn't guess it. The plains of San Augustin are 54 or 6 miles long and up to 10 miles wide. So he had pretty well know where he was going. And he's the only child in our story.
Well, the thing I was wondering about that, you said that his story, you said people find problems with it, or like some people think it's a hoax because he knows more than a 5-year-old would know, you were saying?
Yeah, that's true. But he had a family to reinforce him of an older cousin, older brother, and an uncle and a dad. And the reason it never got very far out of the family, the dad was unemployed when he came to New Mexico in 1947, early in 47, May of 47, about 2 months earlier. And he got, apparently he was a very good tool and die maker who was with an aviation company during the war in Indianapolis, Indiana. And he got a job with the Atomic Energy Commission. And the family had to kind of suppress everything they knew about this and make sure it didn't get out of the family because they thought it might jeopardize his work.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, sorry for throwing these all over the place. It's just they're coming in at random times. For our listeners, can you describe what the alien bodies look like? And you said there was 4 of them?
They're pretty much your standard gray descriptions. And we think that this gentleman named Barney Barnett, the civil engineer, was the first one to describe them. Now, he didn't describe them. He described them to people at the time, within 2 or 3 years of when he found them, but they didn't come forward for 30 years. So we think Barney Barnett, the civil engineer, was the first one to see aliens because the description is the same as we see later on. He said they were about 4.5 feet tall. They were gray in color. They had pear-shaped heads with a heavy part being at the top. Pretty much like most of your people interested in UFOs have seen pictured. But they didn't have the large eyes. They were fairly normal, and I think they were widely spaced, which made them look a little mongoloid. And he said that they looked funny to him. But they didn't have a lot of time because half hour there. Then the team of archaeologists came up, and they were looking at the bodies and the craft, and they had seen the thing come down the night before. So that's why we're sure it was crashed on the night of the 1st or 2nd.
I was going to say, so did Barney Barnett, you were saying he actually seen the thing crash?
No, the archaeologists had seen a light come down and go out. They assumed it was a meteor.
Oh, I see.
And the night before, they just were making camp about 10 miles away. So before they did their archaeology work at the place called Bat Cave, they drove over to find this, whoever it was. If it had been a big meteor, it'd be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, even in 47. And so it was worth checking it out. When they got over there, they found the same thing that Mr. Barnett was standing there looking at, and they were coming from the opposite direction that he'd come from. He'd come from the highway. They were coming from 10 miles across the plains on some back roads. Even had to crawl through a fence to get down to where he was. But they were all only there for about a half hour before the Army shoot them off.
A question that's coming in is, what was the weather like that night when it crashed?
It was clear, and sunset was about 8:42 in the evening, and it'd be dusk for at least another half hour. And we're pretty sure that it was a light in the sky that they saw, and it probably would have had to been after 10 o'clock to get a really dark sky. About there, the sky just goes on forever, and it's clear usually at night. So it wasn't any kind of inclement weather whatsoever. It was a very clear night. And the archaeologists apparently were standing around a fire. The archaeologists were standing around a fire when someone noticed it coming across the plains. And then they also noticed that it was turning, and they know meteors don't turn. Well, this really got them interested.
So you said that the main bulk of the crash, they actually found the ship, you were saying. Could you describe what that looked like or how it was damaged?
Okay. Our engineer, who's used to estimating distances, said 25 to 30 feet in diameter. My guess is it was something like 8 foot thick, like a high school discus you get through in high school or college. Very similar to the shapes you see on the internet and other things. Apparently, the bottom half of the craft had the propulsion system in it, and the top half was a crew compartment. And they, apparently he could look inside there and see a dead alien there, and there's 2 or 3 outside. I forget which it was. So we're looking here at a split big enough for a 4-foot person to come out of, or it would be a 5 or 6-year-old child. Actually, they're smaller than that probably. So it would be probably 18, 20 inches wide and probably tapered at the bottom and top. We found parts of the material in 2011. We called it the honeycomb, where they were apparently generating power in the skin of the craft. And there was some, we found we think, skipped down from a higher elevation down to where we thought it had originally crashed. But we didn't get up to the higher elevation up the arroyo until we got this guy involved that had been there at age 5. And he said, well, it skipped up there. We see wreckage up there. He said, we saw it there in 47 and more. So we went up there and started in. And first day, they found pieces that were 20 inches long and 10 inches wide. Okay. And we had them analyzed, and they're no aluminum formulation from this planet. Primarily aluminum.
Well, the thing that was kind of strange to me, I thought, was how come the military didn't do a very good job of cleaning up all the debris?
Well, having been in the military, I think they call it a snafu. Mm-hmm. And I think the first priority was to get rid of the craft. They did that. We think it was taken to Magdalena one night and shipped by rail up to Sandia Air Base up near Albuquerque. It possibly went down towards White Sands. We're not sure. They got the bodies out, and there was a shortage of equipment up there in that area because the ranchers on the rangeland don't use equipment. Now, if they're building a pond or something, they'll borrow a bulldozer from the Forest Service or something. So it isn't like everybody had a lot of equipment sitting around. In those days, they didn't have the bucket loaders you see today. And most ranchers didn't have anything that was any kind of heavy equipment. They didn't need it. And they had to have to haul their cattle to market and what have you, but they really didn't need heavy equipment. So our guess is they got heavy equipment wherever they could. I don't think there was any military equipment available, nor could any of it be transported there in time to get this place cleaned up. And they cleaned it up the best they could. We think they borrowed a road grader from Catron County and got it down there, and that's how we think they left this gap that we discovered when we first went there. They took the sagebrush roots out, and it never returned. And then eventually had tin cans in the gap, which we think were in the fill that they had hauled in from another part of the arroyo. And so then they apparently tried to cover over everything with a thin layer of dirt rather than pick it up. I don't think they had the personnel to crawl on their hands and knees like some of the movies we see on television, picking up every sliver and so forth and so on. And I think they had some civilians come in and tell them it was a missile crash. I located one man down at Gravette, Arkansas, who's told his family that he helped the military clean up a missile crash. We did some checking. There weren't any crashes on the plains of San Augustin of any kind of that type. So he was cleaning up something else, just probably didn't know it. But we think they got the bodies and the craft out of there within 48 hours, and it was kind of hidden off of the road. So you just throw a camouflage net over it or a few ponchos or something, and you keep it from glinting, you can pretty well hide it there for several days. But no one ever goes down there, except the rancher, you know, with his cattle, and he may not be grazing that particular section at the time. So they did a pretty slipshod job of trying to cover it up, because there's 14 inches of rain there every year. And some of you people living in rainy areas wish you had 14 inches. And we get 22 or 23 in Oregon in a normal year. And that pretty well washes loose dirt off of anything that it's sitting on. And we don't think that they considered all these things. And they didn't compact the material. And we think it was probably an inexperienced military unit who was being rushed to finish, to get everything out of sight, essentially. They did that. But it eroded out, and when rain started coming years later, this pieces started washing off. And we found one big I-beam piece wedged in some rocks. So, and some of the other stuff was on the surface. We did find a piece of that honeycomb material, which is like a big wasp nest made out of aluminum.
Is that the one that you wrote the wafer on your website?
No, I don't have that on the website. I'm working on a book, and it will be on the website sometime between now and Christmas. But this is just primarily the material we had in the old Plains of San Augustin book, which is now out of print. So I'm showing you some of this material which we found before years ago. But
what's that?
I was showing you some of the material. You see, didn't have anything on the website past 2005, and the biggest material we found was started in 2011 and 12. I'm getting it book written, and it'll be on the website probably before December or so.
I was going to say, well, on the website, I was going to ask you a few questions about the materials that you found. Could you start with the shoe soles? So that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, that was very interesting to me too. I'm going to pop back up here and see what chapter that's in. And have you got it up on your website?
It's on chapter 13.
13. All right. Thank you. You got it. That was some interesting material. And it was very, very. We didn't really realize it was. I'm pulling it up now. Didn't realize that it was possibly connected with the crash site until we got to measuring the shoe, and we found that the shoe sole was 4 7/8 inches long, and you can see a picture of it there with a quartz, a 25-cent piece. And we have children who have feet that are 4 7/8 inches long, but they're also 3 inches wide. So I took this to all kinds of people, and we had 30 shoe companies trying to tell us what they thought it was, and we had everything from you couldn't believe what some of the people wrote. They said it came from South America. One guy said it looks to me like a shoe belonged to a pygmy. Well, I looked up pygmies in my internet. They have very wide feet, believe it or not. And this shoe is only an inch at the narrowest, only about 1.25 inches. And at the instep across the ball of the foot, it's about 1.5 inches. And it's obviously very well made. We have a piece over there on the right-hand side of the website picture that we think might have been a kind of a booty kind of a thing that we think it may have been attached to.
So you believe this shoe sole was a part of an alien's gear?
I think so. We don't have any feet this size. We have feet this long, but not this narrow. This is 4 sizes narrower than the average person who has a foot an average child who has a 4 7/8 inch length shoe.
Oh,
And the mothers and dads listening out there know where the kids, wear out their shoes, and generally in the toes, they're still crawling. And our shoe sole turned out to be worn in the middle, center of the bottom side. I don't think we have a picture of it there, but that other one at the top we've more or less discounted. It is odd, but we discounted it because we couldn't find anything more about it. So the one with a quarter and the one that's in the black and white there, showing what the shoe might have looked like, is what we think that they were wearing, and obviously was knocked off when the ship crashed. Now, we found that laying on the surface about 45 or 50 feet from where we think the ship ended up. And I don't think it stayed there over the years. I think it had gotten buried and had washed out. And that's exactly the way we found it.
Did you find any traces of biological material? I mean, it was a crash, so do you think the aliens could have bled out on the ground and left any type of biological material? Well,
60 years later, after numerous coyotes, prairie dogs, pack rats, and other things have been around in a wild area like this, you don't have a lot of biological material left. And,
true, but DNA of some sort that has unique features?
Well, we found a place where something had been buried. And in that part of the country, there's a lot of Hispanic people from Mexico who work in the area and come up there and work and so forth. And they bury their deceased in a nearby cemetery by putting rocks on the grave to make sure that the wild animals don't dig up the remains. Well, we found a disturbed rock heron down in the sagebrush about 150 feet away that had apparently been on top of a grave. There were no rocks anywhere nearby, and all of them had to be carried in to the sagebrush area. And we think there might have been some biological parts that the Army didn't want to haul away on a hot day in a closed truck, and they might have buried them there to kind of get rid of some of the biological material. And we think at least one of the bodies was mutilated. God rest his soul.
Yes.
And some of the material, what we think was biological, was buried there for a short time, maybe 6 months to a year.
Okay.
And I was curious, you said the site that you were talking about, is that the one in Chapter 7 that says a cross marks the spot?
Chapter 7?
Yes, it says a cross marks the spot.
I'm having difficulty hearing you, but I'll get back there in just a second here. I'm having trouble with your question, Nick. Can I get your question again?
Oh, yeah, I was saying, was that the site that you were just talking about? Was that the one that's listed in Chapter 7?
I think we're talking about the site we talk about the site in Chapter 3. If you get to that where it says UFO crash San Augustin, 15 chapters, 100 cover pages, we talk about the plains of San Augustin in Chapter 3, and that gives you a picture of what it looks like. And I'm on that right now in Chapter 3 of that website. And by the way, for the people who tune in late, we're looking at a computer website, UFO Crash Book, one word, .com, www, of course, ahead of it. And the plains are about 55 miles long and about 10 miles wide. And that's a picture of that. And in 1978, the government started building the very large array, which are radio telescopes there. They finished them in 1982. And the lady that saw the UFO flying over the radio telescopes Of course, for many of your listeners will probably realize radio telescopes send signals out into outer space to see if there's any life out there. Well, this is really ironic because she said that the UFO she saw was about 100 feet in diameter, and it hovered over the highway near the Very Large Array in 1982. It's on the homepage, by the way, if you want to go back there. She and her children were looking at that thing, and she said, if they just put a few windows in those air-conditioned buildings, they might see something. I thought that was kind of interesting. But, yeah, that's the plane to San Augustin, and those very large telescopes were put in there in 78 to 82. I think there's 29 of them. They're about 82 tons apiece. Big things.
Yeah. What was the question I had? I was going to ask you, for the UFO wreckage or the material, does that come up on a regular metal detector?
Yes, it does. That's how we found most of it. We didn't know that it had skipped up in the flat hillside till the guy that was 5 years old told us that they'd found wreckage up there when they were there in 1947. Mm-hmm. Well, he went up there and found a lot of stuff himself in 2011, and he went back in 2012, and they found more.
How much wreckage has been recovered so far?
We have 10 or 15 pounds.
Wow.
This is not a minuscule thumbnail type thing like they look for at Roswell. By the time the Roswell people started cleaning up that site over there, or they call it the debris field, they had lots of troops up there and people crawling around on their hands and knees and what have you, and they weren't trying to cover it over with dirt. They had to pick up their pieces. So there was very, very little left, although I do know a guy down in Roswell named Frank Kimber, who did go out and find with a metal detector some very, very small pieces, the size of your thumb or thumbnail, and he's had it analyzed, and it turns out to be the same as what we had on our site. Now, for those of people who are scientifically interested, if you go back to the home page, I want to refer you to the scientific work done by a fellow who's our scientist named Steve Colburn, Colbern, and he did a report. If you go to the website at UFOCrashbook.com and click on Colburn Reports, you will see some of his work. And the first big report is the 42 pages of the metal shards we showed you down there in Chapter 8, wasn't it? That was what he was analyzing, and how he determines that it was not made on Earth. So that COVID report for the scientifically interested people would be fascinating to read.
And I was asking, when you do your lectures, do you bring some of your materials with you so people can look at them?
I stopped finding material about 2005. So I bring the artifact, which we talked about in Chapter 4 and Chapter 6, and I usually bring some of the foil. And, yes, I do. I haven't talked in quite a while. It's been a year or so since I've given any talks. But I do bring the material, and people just shake their heads at it. The foil looks like it's something that came off a barbecue. And one guy even smelled it and said he thinks it smelled barbecue sauce. I said, well, that's nice to know. But we had, maybe they had a barbecue out there, I don't know, but the foil we found was not made here, and it had all kinds of interesting metal in it. Now, our aluminum foil is 98% pure aluminum. They add a little bit of iron and a little bit of silicon and other things to different products. And so you have essentially aluminum and Reynolds. Alcoa and Reynolds have merged now. And our aluminum foil was apparently a byproduct of World War II aircraft that were surplus. Now, of course, they make foil as for just foil's sake. But the stuff we found had up to 40 or 50 different elements in it, and all of those elements over say 100 parts per million we thought were significant. The other elements might have been in the metal to begin with. So we had quite a bit of material in that foil that we don't put in foil. We've been in contact with the Aluminum Association, and they show us everything since 1952 that had been patented in the worldwide patent. And if somebody's making a foil that they're making a profit off of, then they're going to patent the ingredients, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the way our world works. Well, none of this stuff has even ever come close to being patented because it wasn't made here. And it's made for some strange use. We have no idea why it had so much different metallic content, but it did. Each one had 45 or 50 different elements in it, and 8 or 10 of them: silicone, iron, manganese, a little copper, all kinds of things you don't find in our foil.
We have a question about the artificial body part you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
You said that you opened it up and found that gold wire inside. I was wondering, did you have to cut it open, or was it a kind of just like pop open? Or?
Listen, that thing is not going to be cut open in my lifetime. We found an edge that was broken, and I think that would be. I think I showed that edge on 4, try 6. Okay, let's go back to 4. And how it was broken open, and it had been, I think, probably stepped on by the cattle, and they broke it open. And I'm back on that chapter 4. That ain't no part of no cow. I'll tell you about that story in a minute. The top edge of this artifact, we call it, and by the way, that's about the size of your fist. It's about 6 inches across and about 4 inches thick. And that little thing hanging down there in the center, we think possibly was a duct of some kind, an opening. But anyhow, the back part of that was broken off. And inside there we found little pieces of starch, and we pulled some starch out, put it under a microscope, found out it was starch, had it analyzed, and on that starch was a gold wire. I'll tell you, when we first found this, I knew we'd found something unusual. I've been around Western historical sites for years, and I knew what you'd find on the ground, what you wouldn't. And believe me, you don't find anything like this that we see in Chapter 4. And so I took it into a restaurant in Daddle, and it was kind of a cowboy place, nice place to eat, and called Daddle Guest Ranch. And there was 2 cattle inspectors sitting at a table nearby. And I thought, well, this investigation has to start somewhere. And so I walked over to them. They were waiting for their food, and laid this on a clean handkerchief in front of them. Said, "You ever seen anything like this?" And I thought it might be part of a cow or something like that. One guy says, "That ain't no part of no cow." So that's how we titled our chapter. And they looked it over, and I thought it might be an afterbirth, and it turns out later it's made out of polyethylene, which is essentially the same thing as Tupperware. And we use that in medical places because the body doesn't reject it. And apparently the aliens found that out and made this artificial organ out of the material that we use like our Tupperware.
So it's basically something they would stick in like an alien whose heart has started to run out, like an artificial.
We found out that Colonel Corso was a whistleblower that came out of the Pentagon about he was in the Pentagon for years, but he just before he passed away, he came out to the UFO community and started talking about what he had found in files, and that they had apparently had autopsies and what have you of aliens. And he said that they had taken clones of themselves. Excuse me. They've taken made clones of themselves, which is kind of like Dolly the sheep and stuff that's illegal now for us to do, making replicas of anything biological, and they added artificial parts to make them better suited for space travel. We think this is one of those parts. It might be an artificial heart.
I had a question about the revised edition of your book. I was wondering, are you writing like a part 2 to your original crash book, or is it just like a revision of the original?
We're going to use the first. We're going to take out the first 3 chapters of the book, and we're adding all the new material that we found, and adding 3 chapters, taking out the first 3 chapters. We're taking out the Buck Stopped Here about Harry Truman, the ones about George Adamski and the Rock Island 508. And we're starting in with the plane to San Augustin. And then up about chapter 4 and 5, we're starting in with the new material that we found at the site, all the metal stuff and the analysis. And that thing I referred you to, Steve Colbert report on the homepage, that's going to be featured in 1 chapter.
Oh, all right.
And so we are revising the book. That's your question.
Yeah. And
instead of calling it UFO Crash on the Plane to San Augustine, we're going to call it Finding the UFO Crash on the Plane to San Augustine.
So, yeah, let me know when you come out with that, and we'll put it on our radio show, feature it or something.
I will certainly do that, and I have a number of people to notify, and we will probably see it. We're still just getting it finished, and I doubt we'll be in print before the first of next year, if the world is still here. Somebody's predicting we're gonna all go up. I hope it's to have it on December 21st, but I don't know.
Better not do my Christmas shopping.
Well, that was for the Mayan calendar. Somebody said, well, I found 1 page of it, so I don't know.
Yeah. For the, I would say, have you ever tried to find out what the government says is their explanation for what happened at the San Augustin site?
Well, the government doesn't even know we're working on it. Oh. And I think that's been a blessing, because there isn't anyone monitoring now. They claim nothing happened at Roswell, too. Mm-hmm. But we know that's welcome. And so they have made no statement on it, but they have claimed that there were no, I think there was a book called something about Roswell Case Closed, written by a military fellow about 1995 or 6. And I think he said there were no UFO crashes on the plane to San Augustine. And that's the only, or Roswell at the time, that's the only comment I can recall them making, that it didn't happen. And I suppose that they would deny it if they had reason to. One of those things I was telling you about, those tests, that ICP-MS test that was so expensive, that process wasn't invented until 1989. So the government probably has the shelves of this stuff down there, but I don't know that they're investigating it and looking at the material like we did. And I would hope they would be, but I don't think they are. And so we're talking here that one of the reasons we think that for the military silence is it's so far ahead of us that I think it would make people insecure to even know we had aliens. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's been quiet.
Another quick question, because we have about 10 minutes left in the show. I was going to say, do you know where they took the alien bodies once they found them?
No, we don't know. There was 2 labs that it could have gone to initially. One was at Sandia Air Force Base in Albuquerque. It was a big Air Force complex there. Another one was White Sands Missile Range. Next to it was Holloman Air Force Base. Holloman wasn't named until 48. but it was next to their. And we don't think either one had a place to keep bodies. But in any morgue, you'll have temperature control. So I'm assuming that till they got a chance to look at them or get them somewhere, they probably had them there. And we think they may have been flown back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And apparently they had a large area there for that was a refrigeration type place where you could work on, do autopsies and so forth. So my guess is they stored them and sent them back there for expert autopsy work.
And do you think that there's other witnesses that you haven't found yet or that haven't come forward?
No, I don't, because we have one that was 5 years old, and he's since grown into a 70-year-old man, 72 or so, and we know of other people that Barnett, our main guy who was telling people about it, died in 1969. We were able to get the material from friends of his who he told, including a neighbor, by the way. So we don't know of any other eyewitnesses who were who were around in 47, but the 5-year-old.
I have two more questions I was going to ask you. The first one, do you plan on going back to the site here pretty soon?
Yes, we're going back this probably next month.
Next month?
Yes.
There's a quote on your website that says President Eisenhower was seen going inside a UFO. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, that was a second-hand report. We found out that a fellow, I would recommend that the people who have computers go to that website and read that material. We had a 7-part series on a UFO and a UFO video magazine, a UFO website magazine called Filer's Files, and we did that in 2007. And the story basically is this. Eisenhower went hunting about the February 10th, which is when the quail season opens up in Georgia, and he'd been going down there for a couple of years, but he had a very private place that was a plantation that the press couldn't get into. It also had side gates. His plane was was at Spence Air Force Base about 25 miles north of Thomasville, Georgia. And he came in there, then motorcaded down to his plantation where he was going to do hunting. Well, he'd gone out the night they'd gotten there, and apparently they had gotten the sniffles, the cold. So his press secretary said that he's going to be laid up for several days with the sniffles. Well, we're not sure that was true. Don't ask me how I know, but just pretty sure it didn't sound right. I don't think that. We think he had previously made arrangements to meet, to go inside a UFO at Holloman. He had 36 hours in which to do it. Holloman Air Force Base was about a 6-hour flight from Georgia, and he could have very well done it. And our witness, who was in Holloman, remembers seeing his plane, and it was actually invited to do a parade where the military guys will remember that a parade is when you stand at attention with your weapons and essentially salute the man coming, somebody, dignitary. And then they canceled the parade, and they found out that the plane went down on a far runway and stayed there. And they closed the Holloman Air Force Base for almost a day while his plane was sitting down there. And sometime late in the morning, they think 2 UFOs showed up, and this is second and third hand now. And we know he was there, and his plane was there. The second and third hand said they saw him leave his plane, walk to a UFO, and go inside. I thought that was pretty spectacular myself.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, well, the story is there. It's quite interesting. If anybody wants to read it, it's on the website. It's all free. And it would be, we have to click on Eisenhower, and you can get that story. It's a very interesting story. But we had a witness that saw his plane, had friends that heard him speak at a base theater in a hangar. And he wasn't talking about what he was going on in the UFO. He was just there to say, well, keep up the good work, and I know what great work you're doing. At that time, they were doing pre-space work. They were running the sleds to see how fast a man could go, and how they could accelerate and stop, and they had some real early aerospace experiments going on there. And he may have visited some of those, of course.
We have about 5 minutes left in the show. I was going to say, before we end the show, are you doing anything in the next few months? Is what we usually end our show with?
Well, we have a trip coming up, but we won't be probably far. We think the site is pretty well scoured. We're just going to go back and check out some other things, and we're probably going up for the later part of next month. And I'm retired now. I'm a retired teacher, school administrator, and I'm enjoying my retirement. So I haven't got a lot planned.
Yeah. And also, if people want to pick up the first printing of your UFO Crash at San Augustin book, where would they do that at?
Well, it's only available in the CD now. I have a CD of the book itself, and they can click on the site and see the CD and I'm mailing them out. I sent one to Canada the other day. I still have a few of them left. And you can put it on your computer and read it, or a laptop. But we have the complete book on a CD, and it's about $10 or $12, I recall.
And again, if anybody's interested in checking more out, or getting more information, or trying to talk to Art Campbell about the San Augustin UFO crash, you go to his website at ufocrashbook.com. And like Art was saying, you could also order a CD version of the book you can read on your computer. And
yeah,
again,
I'll give my
like
email address if anybody wants it. It's artc, ARTC, at conpoint with 2 N's, CONNPOINT.net. So we look forward to hear from anybody who's a listener. We got to correspond with them. Again,
I'd like to thank you for going on the show, Art, and we'll have to do it again soon when your revised edition of your book comes out.
Okay, well it'll be a while yet, but we're getting it done, and it's going to be a doozy.
Yeah, let us know. We'll put you back on the show.
Okay, we'll do that.
Again, have a
good day, Art.
Talking to you.